So you can know more about the Palliative Care Echo project by visiting echopalliative.com. And we also want to acknowledge the production of this presentation has been made possible through a financial contribution from Health Canada, and the views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the views of Health Canada. So today's first session on grief and bereavement literacy is titled Healing Hearts Supporting the Bereaved Following a Substance Use Related Death, Breaking Down the Stigma and Building Understanding, Compassion, Hope, and Resilience in Grief. So I'm really looking forward to this. So today's session will be about a 15-minute presentation by Jennifer, followed by a question and answer period. Then we're going to have a 15-minute discussion with Marilyn and Leslie about their lived experience, and then followed by a question and answer period. So there's going to be two opportunities for you to ask different questions. So let me now introduce our presenters. So first we have Jennifer Howard, is a dedicated advocate with Moms Stop the Harm, an organization passionately committed to addressing the profound impact of drug harms on families and communities. Jennifer's personal journey is one really marked by both heartbreak and resilience, having tragically lost her beloved son Robbie to toxic drug poisoning. So fueled by her love for Robbie and an unwavering commitment to make a difference, Jennifer really channeled her grief into action, with her personal tragedy serving as a catalyst for change. So Jennifer now serves as program manager for the organization's BC team and coordinates the BC Healing Hearts Bereavement Support, using her voice and her story to really amplify the urgent need for reform in our approach to substance use and drug-related issues. Additionally, today we have with us Marilyn Schick and Leslie Hoja, who are advocates and members of Moms Stop the Harm, to speak on their own personal lived experience. And so now I have the pleasure to hand the session over to Jennifer so we all can learn a little bit more about this topic.
Thank you so much, Joshua. And before we begin, I'll just share that I'm a third-generation settler and uninvited resident on the unceded lands of the Lekwungen peoples of the Wasanic, Songhees, and Esquimalt nations. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you today the work being done by Moms Stop the Harm and the Healing Hearts Bereavement Support that we offer to families throughout BC and Canada who've lost a loved one to toxic drug poisoning. I'm here today to share with you, not as a professional in the field of psychology or counseling, but I'm here today as a bereaved mother and a drug policy advocate. We're going to be talking about loss, and loss is hard. Loss is difficult. But when someone you love dies from a toxic drug poisoning, the grief that follows can be especially painful. And that's what we're going to touch on today. You see, everything in my life changed when I got a call from the RCMP in Shawnigan Lake on May 21st, 2016. My only child, Robbie, was found deceased from a drug overdose. And just weeks earlier, I had held him in my arms, celebrating his birthday. Robbie was only 24 years old, full of hopes and dreams, and he died alone with hiding the shame of his youth. He died alone in his home. When the coroner called to say that Robbie died of pure fentanyl in his system, I quickly became educated as to what was developing in our communities while I was profoundly grieving his loss. The tsunami of deaths that have followed since Robbie has died over the past 7 years is now of epidemic proportions. And so advocates and families who are grieving often use the term the forgotten public health crisis. And this is what we genuinely feel as we're 7 years into this crisis. My advocacy work and coordination of Healing Hearts support groups in BC has brought countless heartbreaking stories of preventable losses to the surface. And with no end in sight to the drug poisoning crisis, the bereaved in this province grows rapidly. And so we have some things that Leslie, Marilyn, and I really hope that you come away with from this time with us today. We hope that you come away with a deeper knowledge and understanding of the drug poisoning crisis in this province, a deeper understanding of its impact on bereaved families, and the unique needs and stigma that bereaved families face with this type of loss. And if we could move along to the next slide, Joshua, that'd be great. To provide, or I'm sorry, is there someone just checking if the next slide could come up? Oh, sorry, we lost you. While they figure out the PowerPoint, I'm just going to start with an introduction to Mom Stop the Harm. I think it's important you have a grounding about our network that is spread across Canada. We like to call ourselves Mothers and Others, and that's because even though this network, a nonprofit, was started by 3 mothers who came together over their mutual loss of their sons, we've grown to over 4,000 members across Canada. And we are organizations, families, and individuals and allies who've all joined in support and demanding change so that another family doesn't experience this kind of loss. Our mission and vision statement, we focus on advocating to end substance use related stigma, harms, and death. We started as an advocacy group and quickly realized that as families came together in our network, there was mutual support and healing that took place. The power of peer support developed within our network. And from that, we recognized the need to develop bereavement support. Thanks, Joshua. Little technical little blip there. We're on slide 7, I believe, the next one. So we work as a network on a community, provincial, and federal level. And one of our key push in the political arena is to see that drug policies change, to implement a safe, regulated supply of substances for those who struggle. And so you may see us, as you see this photo here, we're pretty active politically. This was a protest on April 14th, which was the 7th anniversary of this public health crisis. And so families, through their loss and bereavement, have come together and used that, channel that loss into advocacy for other families who support loved ones who are struggling. If we move on to the next slide, that would be great. Oh, looks like we're having a little bit of trouble with the PowerPoint. In this slide, and listen, we could take a whole afternoon just talking about the challenges of substance use and what people are experiencing in terms of the climate of poison drugs out there on the streets, but also understanding substance use in general and the history around that and the war against drugs. That's a longer webinar than we have time for today. But I do want to give you some grounding in understanding the challenges of substance use and why it's important to reflect upon this. I always like to say in presentations, there's as many reasons why people use drugs as there are people, and it's not for any one of us to judge that journey that led people to use substances. But we know that a lot of things that are rooted in substance use relate to trauma, relate to mental health needs, relate to physical, emotional pain, social pressure. People use recreationally. We like to call them weekend warriors. They work full time, but they like to use substances on the weekend, and for healing and for therapy. Especially in the area of trauma and mental health, what we're seeing is the complete breakdown of any kind of healthcare system that meets those needs. And so people in desperation to numb whatever they're going through continue to turn to the illicit market. And it's getting scarier and scarier, the level of toxic drugs on the street. People are hugely impacted by that. And I like to say what Robbie was addicted to at the time of his death and the pure fentanyl is no longer the same product that's hitting the streets of our communities now. And so I like to also quote Dr. Gabor Mate, who says, "Don't ask why the addiction, ask why the pain." One of my biggest regrets in losing Robbie is I really didn't understand the challenges of substance use. I have so much guilt to work through around buying into the stigma and the many messages I sent Robbie to just stop using. If you just stop using, your life would be better. I really didn't understand the complexity of what was involved. And Robbie was in the biggest fight of his life, as are many of our loved ones today. We'll go on to the next slide. I want to touch on this slide just to impress upon you the frightening statistics that our BC coroner is reporting on a regular basis. These stats capture statistics from 2022. I spoke about the tsunami of deaths earlier, and this is what is reflected. In 2016, Robbie died, the year he died, 995 people died. Last year, we lost over 2,300 people. Drug poisoning is now the #1 cause of unnatural death in BC, more than suicide, motor vehicles, and prescription drugs all combined. If we multiply the number of deaths that we see on this chart with the number of grieving family members, it's frankly completely overwhelming and difficult to grasp. The collective mourning in this province grows each year that these stats come out, and it's heartbreaking. So as we meet today for this workshop, 7 families will be notified of their loved one's death today. And as of June of this year, we're on record to surpass any other year recorded since 2016. So these are sad statistics that call for a huge change in how we approach substance use. And as advocates, again, we continue to push for a safe, regulated supply of substances for people who are struggling. If we go to slide 10, this simply is a summary of the previous slide. And the biggest message here is what we're seeing in the stats is substance use affects every walk of life. This is no longer a Pandora Street problem in Victoria or a downtown East Side problem in Vancouver. This hits every walk of life. And as someone who has run a bereavement group for the last 5 years, I've had mothers come in who have lost college professors. I've had mothers come in who have lost young teens, working professionals, young men celebrating at a bachelor party. I mean, it is across the board. This is the other frightening piece of this crisis that we're dealing with. If we don't change the trajectory of our approach, we will continue to see these numbers skyrocket. And we're going to go to slide 11. And this, sorry, I've got them different. That's okay, we're good. This slide I wanted to share is important because it speaks to life before a loved one's passing. And in terms of grief support and being bearing witness to people who are grieving this kind of traumatic loss, it's really important that you understand what life was like before the loved one's passing. In our bereavement support group, families often need to debrief and share and talk about what the struggles were before the passing. It gives some context to what families have experienced as they invested years in supporting their loved ones' drug substance use challenges. You need to understand that families have been in the trenches. They may be the only detox available for their loved one, the only treatment option for their loved one, as doors are closed and they hear of countless wait lists for support. There is no system of healthcare for people who struggle with substance use as it exists for all those that are struggling. Families have invested love, support, They lie awake at night anticipating their loved one's death over countless years, waiting for that phone call that none of us want to receive. They've also experienced interaction with the justice system over the course of time, often feeling stigmatized in the process and their loved one stigmatized in that process. And so stigma is a big part of their life experience as they support loved ones. It's a big part of their life as they grieve their loved ones. And I'll go to the next slide. This is a little video clip. It's a delayed start here of Kim Porter, an advocate who lost her son in Alberta. It's a little delayed. There we
Dear
go.
sweet Neil, as my pen hits this paper, my thoughts of what I want to say escape into the other world. Perhaps that's where you will hear them best. The words are of frustration, anger, and despair, and most significantly, of love. The words still assault me as they once did you. Words of hate, of shame, of worthlessness, words of fear. You struggled, you fell, you got up, and you died anyways. You died alone with your pain and with the weight of society's stigma dehumanizing you. How I wish a system was in place to honor and support your needs. How I wish the edges of the torment of your leaving so soon would soften. And then I see a ladybug crawling up a piece of grass, and I am brought to tears. Since you're leaving, beauty shows up, as does grief, when least expected. I love you, as always. Your mom.
Thank you. And what a powerful that clip that is. And I still get emotional every time I hear Kim's words. It's what families feel. It's what they've struggled with as they've supported their loved ones. And so we need a system change, and we need to work hard to remove the stigma that's attached to this health disorder. And so as we move along in this presentation, I want to share information about our Healing Hearts support programs in BC. We are a peer facilitated bereavement support, and our groups were launched in BC and Alberta in 2017. Our BC team received funding from the Ministry of Mental Health and Addiction in 2020, and we've been expanding our groups throughout the province. We currently have 15 support groups, in addition to one virtual support group, which, our goal there is to really reach those remote communities that don't have bereavement supports available to them. If we move to the next slide. As I mentioned earlier, we recognize as an organization, this network that we set up as a primarily advocacy was also providing mutual support and healing to families who are grieving. And so organically, we were doing bereavement support as we held each other in a safe place to share and talk about our loss. So when we looked at formalizing that support, we wanted a peer facilitated type of model. We also wanted an open format type of model, meaning people can come and go at any point in the stage of their loss. So I have families that come to my support group who are 2 weeks after their loss, raw, in pain, not feeling they're going to make it through. And I have families who are 4 years into their journey and come to my group. And the beauty of this model is that you see organically families who are further along in that journey reaching out and embracing those that are newly bereaved, basically saying, I was there too. I didn't think I was going to make it through, but here I am. And it provides some hope to those that are newly bereaved that this is something that you can survive, this traumatic passing. Our facilitators are all volunteers, and they all have lived experience, meaning they've suffered a loss. We work hard to provide support and training to our facilitators, and that means we provide ongoing training and workshops on trauma-informed support, group facilitation skills, understanding complicated grief. If we move to the next slide, Joshua, thank you. This slide captures some of the research that we did as we took the time to explore what kind of model we wanted. And definitely there are benefits from a peer facilitated model of support. One is that it reassures people attending that they're not alone in their journey. And that's one of the main messages we get from families is, I feel isolated. I feel I have no one to talk to, no one who understands my loss. I can tell you in my personal network of friends, when I lost Robbie, there was no one that had any understanding of addiction, no one who really got what I had gone through with Robbie. And so there's beauty in healing, in coming together and sharing that mutual journey. It becomes a community of safety, acceptance, and it's stigma-free. And again, stigma-free. You're going to hear that theme throughout our messaging today. As I said, many families feel they have no one to talk to about their loss outside of the group support that we offer. If we go to the next slide, this is where we, again, just drive home the impact of stigma on the forgotten mourner. And some families will reflect, listen, I feel stigmatized. My friend lost her mother to cancer, and she got all this amazing support from her friends and family. I lost my son to a drug overdose, and no one has called me. No one has reached out. And so the stigma and the isolation that families feel is real. Feeling forgotten, feeling this isn't as valued as another type of loss. Friends and families may feel uncomfortable about the cause of death and uncertain how to support you. Others may make you feel ashamed around the nature of the death. And tragically, I've had some families disclose that they have not revealed the nature of their loved one's passing because of the shame and stigma. And for me, that is so wrong. Just when you need the love and support of others, you feel alone and unacknowledged. So we'll go to slide 18. So what do families need from grief supporters? Some of these words reflected on the slide are from an annual survey we send out to our families. It's anonymous. We want to hear feedback from people in terms of their experience with Healing Hearts. Families want someone to listen to the story before they're passing. They want to be in a judgment-free place of sharing. They also want to talk about their loved one. That's one of the biggest things I do always. 7 years after losing Robbie, I still need to talk about him and share stories about his life. Who was he before his addiction? Let's take the addiction away and honor and value the person before the addiction stole them away. So using language and words that convey your loved one mattered, your loved one was valued is so important as a grief supporter. Becoming educated around substance use. If you have a friend who has suffered this kind of loss, get onto Google and learn more about what the challenges are that people face. As I said before, it was Robbie's biggest fight of his life. And so as we come to the closing slide, the next one, I just want to thank you for this opportunity to share the important bereavement support that Mom Stop the Harm continues to offer to families throughout BC and Canada. These are our sons, our daughters, our mothers, and fathers and siblings and friends. They were all full of promise and hope, and they all died from a preventable death. And this is sadly, you see in this slide, the faces of our loved ones at a protest in April. The tragedy of the losses sadly continues, and so too the support to families is critical. And additionally, the advocacy that's needed to prevent further losses. And so I leave with you that quote from Megan Devine, and thank you again for listening and hearing more about the work that we do. It's just so important. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer, so much for that presentation. It was short. I know you could have went on for a long time. And I said I was captivated and I want to learn more. And I think that's what this is really about, is just providing a moment to help you reflect and realize there's a lot we don't know. And it's nice that you're able to share some, and hope to really keep in contact to other presentations you do in the future. So, so right now we're going to open up questions if anyone has, or comments to the audience. And so please raise your Zoom hand, or if you want to type a question in the chat. We have about 5 minutes to take a few questions, and then we'll move over and hear some more personal lived experience journeys. And just as we're hosting this meeting, it's not a webinar, and so you probably notice you see a bunch of different faces on the screen. So on your PC, there is a button in your top right-hand corner where you can switch the speaker and highlight the speaker. So you can do that now, and you'll just be the person who is speaking, which makes it look so much more presentable. So first, okay, we have a question, Jeannie.
Hi, my name is Jenny. I'm a client services coordinator with Sunshine Coast Hospice on the Lower Coast, so in the Sechelt Gibsons community. We've identified that this kind of support is something that our community needs. So I'm wondering how. I see that the email to reach out to you to start a group here.
Yes.
And perhaps this is a longer conversation off camera, as they say. But I guess we're curious about if we don't currently have peers on the coast who have capacity or interest to hold a support group, do you think that there's still potential and possibility and value in creating a group that would be supported by volunteers who had training around grief group support?
Yes, and just to send that message out to all of you today, if you are interested in bringing a group to your community, please reach out to me and we can absolutely talk about that. We do have organizations who have reached out to us. We've had First Nations communities reach out to us, and that's another area that we hope to develop. But absolutely, we want to get this out to every community in BC, and so we also have a huge membership list. 50% of our membership is in BC. So if you're in a community, we could also find a Mom Stop the Harm member who could partner with you to bring a support group to your community. So just absolutely, why don't you shoot me an email, Jenny, and we can talk further about that, and would love to hear from more people who would like this, to bring this to their area.
Thanks, Jennifer.
That's great. And we have time for one more question if someone wants it, or we'll move on. Doesn't seem like it. So we'll move. Oh, so Jennifer, can you please provide your email address again?
Yes.
So you might be getting a lot of questions, but that's part of it, right? And I think that's the beauty of knowing who to approach to answer some of your questions. As you said, if you want to develop a group or you're looking for resources, and that's what we're hoping to achieve today, is to provide direction for people with their questions on the subject. Okay, that's great.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to the next section of the presentation, which will be really talking to Marilyn and Leslie about their lived experience. And so thank you both for joining us today and really opening up and being able to voice some of your experiences and what you've learned. So I guess we'll want to ask you, as Jennifer talked about, to tell me a little bit about the story of the person who has died by the substance use related death, and then also a little bit about your experience processing that grief. And so I'd like to first start with Marilyn.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me? Okay. Okay. Well, my son passed away July 10th, 2017. He was 50 years old, and he had had drug abuse problems his whole life. He was beaten by someone I knew when he was just a youngster. I won't go into the details because they're pretty horrific, but I knew nothing about it. That set up a lot of problems for him, obviously. He had ADHD to begin with when he was a little guy. I ended up hearing he probably had borderline personality disorder. Anyway, his whole life was pretty well a mess. And then he came to Victoria about 10 years before his passing, and it was really probably down at the bottom, I think. And he came to Victoria, and he just straightened his life out. I was away teaching in Japan, and he straightened himself out somehow. I don't know how he did it, because it amazes me now, knowing what I know now, and went to Camosun College, got his 2-year degree, transferred to UVic, and was 2 credits away from getting his BA. What happened, he got involved with a woman that was bad news, and she left him on his 50th birthday. I had to go and teach overseas, and his friends and work helped him through it, so I thought, but I don't think so. He got involved with another woman. He had been on his own forever, and all of a sudden, boom, 2 women in a row. Moved her in, but she had come from Ontario. She wasn't certain whether she was going to stay here. I think that gave him a lot of anxiety. Anyway, I think he just started using again, and I invited him and this new lady over, and we had dinner and played some cards and things, and he was drinking, and he had told me, Mom, there's 3 things I can't do. I can't drink because it makes me want drugs. I can't live near people who use, and I can't have a lot of money because it's too dangerous. And anyway, he drank quite a bit that night, and I was worried, but I didn't bring it up. I was afraid of my son. When he was young, he pulled out knives and things, and yeah, he was anyway, so it was very scary to bring up stuff like that. Now I look back at it and I think I'm probably the one person. He never would have hurt. However, I didn't. The actual day that Kev passed was July 10th, 2017. Beautiful day. I was back from teaching. I was going to Deepwater Fitness, had on my house coat because I didn't want to put my bathing suit on until just before I left. Looked out the window and saw a car out there, with a couple that had been camping. Obviously, they were hanging their blankets out to dry, and there was a police car pulled up, and I thought, oh, I'll bet they're nervous. He's going to say something. And then I didn't think anything of it. And then another police car pulled up, and the one police officer was talking to the other. And then I got busy doing dishes and everything. And the next thing I knew, there was a knock on the door. I opened it up, and there were two police officers, a man and a woman. And the first thing that came into my mind was, uh-oh, Kevin's done something. They asked if I was Marilyn Schick. I said, yes, I was. They asked if they could come in. And they said that Kevin had passed away. And that was a big shock and disbelief at first, because he had been so street smart. And there was fentanyl coming out in 2017, but I figured he knew what he was doing. I never thought that he would end up dying from a drug overdose. When this happened, a lot of people couldn't sleep when they lost their children. I was the opposite. I slept and slept and slept. It might have been, I was just sad. I don't know, depression. Anyway, I had a lot of support from my husband, who is not Kevin's father, from my daughter, who hadn't seen her brother for probably 30 years, because he had beat her up once, and she was scared of him. And from his daughters and their mother came out from Calgary. And my daughter had her business it was in an apartment, a condo. And so she held the celebration of life, and his professor from Camosun came, and students came, and all this wonderful stuff just poured out about him. I was blown away how he had helped to push through a class of service learning at Camosun and now at UVic, just this wonderful stuff. And I was just, wow, this is my son. Anyway, then after everybody left, the guilt sets in. About 2 months after, I had been told about the Compassionate Friends, and I went to their meetings. And about the fourth meeting, they mentioned there was a group for people who had lost their children to overdose. And that's when I went to Jenny's group. And I've been going pretty well ever since. Then Jenny told us about a group that hospice was setting up for parents who had lost their children to overdose. And I was in that very first group where I met Leslie, the other speaker here today. And there were 5 of us, and we still meet to this day. I think it was in 2020 we met, because it was
Yes, it was 2020. Yeah, 2020.
And so that really, really helped a lot. I continued with Sue after the group ended, and she and Heidi were wonderful. That was Sue McKenzie and Heidi Wigmore. You might know them. So it's been 6 years, and there's been ups and downs, and things trigger you. You might see somebody that has on a hoodie that, like he was, or his size, or he had a shaved head. Music will set me off. Telling people stories about him. Just when you think you're pretty strong, all of a sudden you're telling a story and you lose it. It's you don't know when it's going to pop up. The reason I still go to Healing Hearts meetings is because it's someplace to talk. Like Jenny said, I can talk about my son. I can't talk about my son to my friends. I'll bring him up. If somebody says something, we went to somewhere, oh, I went there with Kevin. And I keep him alive like that. But I can't really talk about it because nobody understands unless they've been through it. So at Healing Hearts, I get to talk. Most meetings I'm fine. Some meetings I lose it. You're up and down. And I had one woman at the meeting. She was new, and she was sitting beside me. And during the break, she said to me, "Oh my God, if you're still coming here after 6 years, there's no hope for me. I'll never make it through this." And I pulled her aside after the meeting and I said, "I don't come to these meetings because I need them, although I do." I said, "I want people to know that you'll make it, you'll be okay." And that's why I still go, as well as being a place where I can talk if I need to. And the last thing I want to say is about stigma. And there's a lot of stigma out there, and it's very hard. I'm 75 years old, so I grew up in the era where taking drugs is really bad. And my son is, a lot of people didn't even know I had a son. And I wish that I knew then what I know now, but I didn't. Nobody's fault but mine. But just to show you where the stigma comes in, I'm on the board of a seniors activity center, and we had to get a police check. And throughout the years, I've always wanted to go to the police and thank the female and male officer that came that day to my house, because they were so wonderful. And I thought, oh, this is my chance. And I went in and I put my paperwork in, and there was a police officer there, and he was so kind and very cheery and that, and I was cheery back, and I walked out because I couldn't let him know that I had a son that had taken drugs. It was just there. And when I went back, there was a woman, and she was fine. And again, I couldn't remove that thought that I thought they had of me by downgrading myself by saying I had a child who died and I'd like to thank you. And it's there. It's just there. And that was my most recent experience with stigma. So it's a tough one. So that's it for me. I hope I haven't gone over time.
No, this is just it's a moment for you to share and a moment for us to listen. And so I'm so sad you don't get to talk about Kevin more often, but I'm glad you did find this group and you found Leslie, which is just, I think, beautiful for me, because sometimes all you need is that one person to really help you through. And it's great if you have more, but that one person is just so important to not feel so isolated as you sort of were talking about. So thank you so much for really sharing that with us today. And Leslie, I want to come to you and ask you the same question. If you would tell us a little bit about your person and your grief experience.
Thank you for offering this opportunity for people to hear us speak. And I told Marilyn yesterday that even 6 months ago, I could not have been here today. My son died 3 a bit more years ago, January 2020, right before the pandemic. And because of this, again, what Marilyn was just saying about confronting people and admitting that you had a son who died from drug poisoning, it's just like, well, my son got a PhD, and my son's writing a book, and my daughter's, doing research in Afghanistan on women's rights. Oh, my son was selling illegal marijuana. My son went to jail. I didn't tell anyone that. None of my friends knew that. Nobody, only my husband and my other son. And I lived with that stigma for years. He was involved in that world. It was very lucrative. selling medical marijuana products. Anyway, so when he was young, he was very dynamic and also had problems with school. Like Marilyn said, some ADHD issues, and he went to South America on this journey for finding medical marijuana-ish things, and he was going to bring these ideas back to his friends who were doing the same thing. And he sort of got lost there, and we had sent him money, like, you know, he was like living on the street, and I got a call from the embassy, Canadian embassy in Peru, and said, you have to come down here. Your son's in the hospital. He's vomiting. So anyway, so I went to Peru and I said, okay, you've hit rock bottom. Now you have to go from here to treatment center. You're not coming home. You're not going to see your friends. You're going right to treatment. And because he was dying in the hospital, or we thought he might be, he agreed and he went. And for 5 years, he was doing well. He was part more of the family, where he used to sort of avoid us. And then for some reason, who knows why, that day, he got something. And again, he thought he was very street smart. And he didn't use, as far as I know, a lot of hard drugs ever. But I don't know, for whatever reason, like Gabor says, what was that pain that day? What was a struggle? What was happening for him that we will never know? So he died in his room alone again. And his ex-wife knew something was wrong because they were communicating, and suddenly the email stopped or the text stopped. Someone went to his room and told the landlord they had to open the door. We got a call from her, so we went over there. Again, the police were unbelievably kind. And then we had just the trauma and the sadness. And again, I never told anyone. Like Jenny said, I didn't tell anyone how he died. We had a celebration of life for him. This was, the celebration was days before the shutdown, the pandemic. And so somehow we were able to have 200 people gather and celebrate him. Everyone came, from the man who used to run the bicycle store where he hung out as a teenager, to our neighbors and friends he hadn't seen in a long time. I got some support from, I don't know, somebody said you should get some counseling. I called hospice and they directed me towards Healing Hearts. And from that, then I found out about this, then again, back to hospice for this group that was run for people who lost a child or a loved one from substance use. And that was again 3 years ago, in 2020, the summer. And that's when I met Marilyn, and we met for 7 weeks and went through different activities and ability to learn more about the grief process, the journey, the use of substances. And again, like both Jenny and Marilyn said, I didn't know anything about, I really didn't know about these issues. I didn't want to know. I pretended it didn't exist. I ignored it. And I was like the proverbial ostrich with my head in the sand. I wanted just to do something else and get better and be quote normal, get a normal job. And so Healing Hearts has been there right from almost the beginning of my grief journey. And as Marilyn said one time to me, she said the first few times I came, I could barely walk through the door. that walking through the door the first time is one of the hard things that you ever do as a person surviving this kind of trauma. And as she said, as Jenny said, it's not a regular death. It's the trauma of losing someone by this way that it doesn't have to be. It doesn't, when kids were younger and my age, people started experimenting. Well, they weren't going to die from going to a party and trying something. And so now you don't know. And I didn't know, I didn't understand, I didn't want to know. So that again, that stigma is huge. It's huge. Marilyn's story about these interactions. Recently, somebody asked me, how many sons I had, or talked to me about my son and said, "Do you have other children?" I had 2 sons, and now I have one who's alive. How do I answer that question? If even however he had died, it's a really time of almost sheer terror. If someone asked me that question, what do I say? I was writing a biography about myself, and I said to my husband, "How do I say? What do I say? Do I have 2 children?" I just wanted to add just one little thing. I know my time is about over, but my story is a little complicated and also in another way somewhat beautiful, that he was adopted. He was a Métis descent. I never knew his birth mother until he died. He was in contact with her, and I'm not sure why, and partly because she lives in the interior, but never had touch with her. She came, and now we are sisters, sister mothers, and we share our grief. And so that's one of the gifts I've been given. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Leslie, so much for sharing it. You hear these stories, but you're right. I'm an ostrich too. Like head in the sand, not knowing, what people are actually going through until you hear it. And then like you can see stats, but it's like the real life experiences that you're sharing today, it moves you in a different way. And I just want to thank you for having the courage to open up and share. And I think that's so meaningful to me and hopefully everyone else who watches this. And we are just at the end, so we're not going to be able to take questions at this time, but I will sort of let people know that we will collect the resources that Marilyn, Leslie, and Jennifer used throughout sort of their grieving process, and we'll be able to send that to you to sort of have some more materials that people can be aware of. But I love both your stories, how it was you contacted one organization and they led you to the right place. And I think that's a beautiful thing because we don't know where to go. And what both you are saying is that organizations need to know who is doing what within their own communities to know where to send people to get the support and to not feel so isolated. So, once again, thank you so much, all of you, for sharing your stories today. And so we hope that everyone enjoyed the session, and we will be asking you to complete a short survey as this is sort of our first session in the series. Tell us what you love. Tell us if you want this to be longer. This could have been like 2 hours, if not more. So please let us know what we can do better to help facilitate more understanding within this area. And so that link is going to be put into the chat. Please fill that out. And then we also have a registration for the next session in the series, which is Grieving the Death of a Pet, which is scheduled for September 19th at noon. And that link is also going to be in the chat. And so to be notified on other sessions and series, also the action plan, feel free to register for our newsletter. As I said, these sessions are going to go on each month forever, hopefully, because this is not going to be a topic that ever gets talked enough about. And so our aim is to provide everyone in the presentation with a recording, also summary notes, and also other resources, as I sort of spoke about, that that can be beneficial to you. So just watch your email for that information. And thank you all for attending, and I really hope to see you again. And once again, please share all the love to Leslie, Marilyn, and Jennifer for really sharing their stories. Put it in the chat. We'll keep this open and we'll send those to them so they know that what they've done is meaningful and it takes great courage. And I'm just really appreciated for you to be so open and honest. It means a lot to me and to hear about the special people in your life and also what you're going through. And so just thank you again from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity today. Thanks to Marilyn.
Thank you, everybody, for listening.
Mhm.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so we hope everyone has a great rest of the day. And once again, if you have any questions, feel free to email me or Jennifer, and we'll hopefully guide you to the right place. Thank you.